Today we're gathering around the campfire with Ray, a QHS member whose life is as exciting and grounding as a hike through the mountains. But what trails did he tread to reach these heights? Let's trek into the wilderness and discover the adventures that led Ray to where he is today.
Hi, my name is Ray Lewick, and I will do my best to share my life history with you, but I'm 73 years old, so this may take a while. I have a pretty interesting background. My parents were White Russians, which means they were Germans who were among those who had been invited into Russia to farm the land there. It was sort of a way to keep the peace between Russia and Germany because they'd been kept fighting back and forth. But those are very difficult years. My father was born in 1909, and he was the oldest. He lost his father at age 9 when the Red Army came in and took his father away, and he was never heard from again. His mother remarried, and a few years later, that husband was also taken away, and she married a third time and also lost that husband to the Red Army. So it was a pretty difficult place. My father and his younger brother would oftentimes sleep in the vegetable garden because the soldiers would come into the village at night and take any able-bodied men and conscript them either into the army or into work camps. And then when my father was 18, he fled the country and came to Canada. But his mother, and he had a half-brother and half-sister from her second marriage. They remained there, and one night the soldiers came to her little farmhouse, and they took away all of her possessions, her few chickens and her furniture, all her dishes and pots and pans and utensils, and left her with nothing except she had hidden 2 potatoes in the wood-burning stove in the kitchen. But they told her that, well, we'll bring everything back tomorrow. All you have to do is renounce God. And she was not going to renounce God, and she knew this was not a safe place to live. Stalin had killed more people than Hitler did, mainly starving them to death in different camps. And so she escaped the village at night. There was only one road through the village, but fortunately she knew the guard at the other end of the road out of the village, and he fortunately allowed her to escape. My mother's family, she was born in 1923 in the same region in Ukraine, and they were there until World War II. And then when the Germans invaded Russia, they took all the German citizens or people of German heritage out of Ukraine and took them back to Germany. And that's where my mother's and father's families met in a camp there where they housed the immigrant Germans coming out of Russia. My father was in World War II as a soldier. Fortunately, because he spoke Russian and German, he did not have to fight on the front lines, but he did wind up in Germany as a translator. So he was able to work for a captain in the army. He became a sergeant, but he was primarily a cook and a translator. And after the war, he came back to Milwaukee. He had lived in Canada first. He worked the wheat fields during the summers, harvesting wheat from Canada down through Kansas, and did that for several years, and then was a truck driver. So he had relatives in California where he spent some time, went back to Canada where his relatives were, and then he had a few relatives in Milwaukee, so he wanted to see the World's Fair. I'm not sure what year that was. And that was in Chicago, so he was a hobo on a train and hoboed his way through the U.S. to come to Chicago and wound up in Milwaukee. And then he brought his mother and half-brother and half-sister over after the war. And he was 39 at the time, and his mother said to you, Junge, was ist los mit du? Warum bist du nicht verheiratet? So, my son, what's wrong? Why aren't you married? You're almost 40 years old. What's going on here? So she said, this is not good. I guess she wanted some grandchildren. So he said, I haven't met the right person. And so she said, well, I met this family over in Germany, and they have 3 wonderful girls. So he began corresponding with my mother, and they wrote letters back and forth, and I still have those letters for a year. Mail was kind of slow, so I only have about 15 or 20 letters. So they aren't really long letters. So I don't know how well they got to know each other, but after 1 year, he decided that he would bring her over, and he could bring her over as a war bride. So he arranged for that, and he had 60 days to marry her, or else he'd have to send her back. Well, he didn't want to do that, so on day 58, they got married. And I can't imagine what that was like for my mom, coming over to a strange country where she did not know the language. She arrived here without any money and had to take a train from New York to Chicago and then on to Milwaukee to meet a man that she had never met before and didn't know anything about except what his mother had told her. So they got married, and she got pregnant pretty quickly, had my oldest sister in November, and then my older brother the following October. But my father was a very, very giving man and a very caring man, and he sponsored a number of families from Germany. And so what he would do is have the family come over. They would live in our home in the basement, and he would go with the husband and try to help him find a job, help him find an apartment, help him get a car, and then that family would move out, and then he would invite another family to come in. And then my mother's parents and one of her sisters came over, and they lived with us also. The other sister, unfortunately, died of cancer before she could come over. But here was my mother, who didn't speak the language, who had a house full of people, many strangers, and she was responsible for the cooking, the cleaning, and the entertaining. And so it was very difficult for her. So I got pregnant, or she got pregnant with me. So I became her third child, and she was overwhelmed. She had 2 babies in diapers, was now pregnant, had a house full of people, and she became very depressed. She attempted to abort me, and I went through a hypnoanalysis session where I kind of time traveled back and re-experienced that abortion experience, which was crazy and overwhelming to me, and I had no clue whether it was real or not. So I went and talked to her about it and said, hey Mom, I just had this therapy session where I experienced, what was you trying to end my life? And she broke down crying and said, yeah, that actually happened, and I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that, but I was so overwhelmed with all that was going on that she was at, it was more than what she could handle. But she overcompensated for that mistake and spoiled me my whole life, so it turned out pretty good for me. But and the funny part is that later my dad told her about condoms, and she said, "You knew about this the whole time and you never told me?" So she didn't know birth control was a possibility. She was a pretty naive, farm girl from Ukraine who all of a sudden was thrust into the big city of Milwaukee. But my mother and father gave me a great childhood. My father had a 4th grade education and my mother had a 6th grade education, so they were very blue collar. My father worked as a mechanic at a big factory called A.O. Smith, and my mother worked a number of jobs in various factories and bakeries and school cafeterias. So they were, again, the typical stereotype of Protestant work ethic, stoic German family. My dad would often work 2 jobs, but he, along with his German relatives, built a house for us for the first, we moved there when I was 5 till I was 14, and then he built a bigger house so that we could each have our own bedroom. So they gave us the best that they could, but we were lower middle class family, but we had a good life, very good. So I was able to go to a good school and get a good education, and like I said, we did a lot of camping. Traveled throughout the country. My dad would go visit his army buddies and his relatives, so we never stayed in a hotel. We would always camp or stay with some people that he knew. Yeah, and it was a German family, so my parents never said the words "I love you" until I was much older in life. They didn't give us a lot of hugs, so it was not a demonstrative loving family, but they showed their love by working for us, by wanting to give us a better life than what they had. And so they did their best and worked extremely hard to make sure that we had a really good life. They were also very involved in what was a German Baptist church. So many of the White Russian Germans who had immigrated, Milwaukee had a big German population, and so there were several churches where they spoke German, and so they could kind of keep that cultural identity going. So we were in church, probably 3-4 times a week. That was a big part of our lives. We were raised Baptist, so it's kind of the don't drink, don't smoke, don't dance type of thing. But they did help me to find a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, which has been the center point of my life. And so lots of wonderful memories, good experiences as a child growing up. As I said, I had a good education, went to a good high school. We didn't have much money, so I stayed at home for college. I lived with my parents and went to the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. In high school, they give you these occupational tests to see what you could, what you want to be. And it was like, well, do I want to work with machines? Computers weren't really around at the time, or do I want to work with people? And so the test said I was more of a people person. So I majored in psychology at the university, and that's where I came to have a really committed relationship with Christ, because my freshman year, I became disillusioned with myself and felt like, well, I'm just a hypocrite. I go to church on Sundays, but I swear like the other guys during the week and, do things that aren't honoring to Christ. So I'm going to stop being a Christian because I don't want to be a hypocrite. But then I tried some of the other things that college kids pursue and didn't find any happiness through that. But I did meet some kids who were really happy, but they carried their Bibles to school every day. And, as I talked with them, I found out that it's not just believing in Christ that's important, but it's having that relationship with Him, having Him in your life, having the Holy Spirit guide you and lead you, and having Christ as the Lord of your life. So my life was really transformed then, and I became very involved in kind of spiritual activities on campus, talking to people of other faiths and kind of showing why Christ is the only way. And I had a number of leadership positions, and so university was a transformational time for me. After I completed my master's degree in psychology, I was challenged, not that I was challenged, but a pastor that I knew who would lead these Bible studies for young people said that there were no Christian outreaches on any of the universities in Southern Europe. So he said, it would really be good if some of you might take up the torch and go spread the light of Christ at some of the universities in Southern Europe. And so I prayed about this, and along with two other friends, we wrote to the universities of Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, and Turkey to see if we might be admitted to any of the universities. Well, we were admitted to the Aristotelian University of Thessalonica, Greece. So they had a special program where they would teach Greek to students, and they had students from all over, from the Middle East, from Africa, from the U.S. who would come there, and it was free. So you can't beat free tuition to go to university. So we went to the Aristotle University in the city of Thessalonica. We, interestingly enough, lived on Apostle Paul Avenue, so number 30. And I had great exposure to life overseas and to serving God in that capacity. I came back, and when I was in the university, I was teaching some courses there, and there was a girl who was of Greek nationality who was one of my students. And so I asked if she would help kind of acclimate me to the Greek culture. And so she would take me with her family to the Greek Orthodox Church and various other Greek activities. And I told her, well, I'm going to be gone for 2 years. I'm going as a missionary to Greece, so, I'm not interested in any, loving relationship, girlfriend relationship. Well, that was what my head said, but my heart fell in love with her, and we ended up getting married, and we're blessed with 3 wonderful kids, 2 boys and a girl. After I came back from Greece, wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Do I want to be a missionary? Do I want to be a pastor? The other 2 guys that I went to Greece with both went into divinity school, but I decided, well, I don't think I'm cut out to be a great preacher. I'm better at listening than I am at talking. So, and I think, again, with my childhood, this played a factor because, the German thing was kids are to be seen, not heard. And with my traumatic experience of almost being aborted, I had real abandonment issues. I was always pretty much of a sad kid, and people go into psychology because they're trying to figure out what's wrong with themselves. So I think I knew deep down there was something wrong with me, that I had these issues of I was very shy and timid and afraid of rejection, and pretty much was a people pleaser my whole life because I just didn't want to be rejected because of that early traumatic childhood experience. And I thought, well, I'm a better listener than I am a talker, so I decided to get my doctorate in clinical psychology. I had a wonderful career. I developed my own private practice and hired a number of people and was very successful with that. I specialized in non-medication alternatives, primarily with kids with attention deficit disorder, but also with adults with anxiety and depression. I used what's called neurofeedback, or EEG biofeedback, where I would put electrodes, sensors on their scalp to measure their brainwave activity, which was hooked up to a computer, which would give them feedback. So they call it EEG biofeedback, and this would give them the feedback to help their brain to be able to pay attention better, to help them to not be so fidgety or hyperactive. And so it was a wonderful career, but I was going against the common medical practice. So what the insurance companies wanted was that, okay, you got this kid who's got ADHD, send him to a psychiatrist, have him put him on meds, have him see the psychiatrist 4 times a year, and that's all we have to worry about. Well, I didn't want to do that, and my approach, it takes like 30 to 40 sessions before you can get lasting results with EEG biofeedback, and so you're looking at 2 to 3 sessions a week, and the insurance companies just didn't want to pay that. So I was going against the flow, upstream, and it was very difficult to get reimbursement from the insurance companies, and to see a psychologist 2 or 3 times a week is not really within the budget of most middle-class families. So I had a practice in the suburbs of Milwaukee, mainly with middle-class people, and they just couldn't afford to pay out of pocket. So in 2008, earlier, my ex, at the time, back about 10 years before that, had breast cancer, went through a lot. There were some other issues in our life that we went through, and she ended up getting back together with her childhood sweetheart and divorced me in 2008, which devastated me, and it just devastated me. It was something I never expected to happen. I knew there would be 2 realities in life. One is that Christ is going to return, and the other is that I'll never get divorced. Well, I did get divorced. I ended up pursuing another career with 2 gentlemen, which is a long story, but it was a really super exciting opportunity. But again, this was in 2008, and I put $400,000 into this business opportunity, and one of the co-owners absconded with my money. He ended up in a federal prison, but I never got my money back. So I lost $400,000 in this deal. Back in 2008, banks weren't willing to lend money to new startup companies, so I had been financing everything myself, and so that kind of was a traumatic experience that I'm still trying to work my way out of. And there are some other major events there, but I know we're way over time for this prequel. So where am I at now? Oh, and again, I've had good health throughout my life. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with hyperparathyroidism. And so I hit 70, and all of a sudden I'm like, I had no energy. I was fatigued all the time. I never used to take naps, but I wound up taking naps every day and just running out of energy late at night, and just felt, pretty horrible. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what turning 70, is this what happens when people turn 70? This is horrible. Well, I went for my annual checkup, and my physician said that my calcium was super low, and my parathyroid hormone was high. So she sent me to a specialist, and they diagnosed me with hyperparathyroidism. And I'm like, oh, good. Well, I finally found the reason why I feel so horrible. And I said, well, what's the treatment for this? And they said, well, the only treatment is surgery. That's really the only treatment for it. So we have 4 parathyroid glands right next to our thyroid. So they don't have really anything to do with the thyroid, except they're next to it. So that's why they call them parathyroid glands. But through the testing, they found out that all 4 of my glands have tumors on them. So they said, well, we're going to do surgery. And at first I was excited to get the diagnosis because, and then I read up on it and said that, oh yeah, they do surgery and people have 1 or 2 glands removed with the tumors on them, and then they can function normally. Well, the surgeon, after they had done the testing, told me that all 4 of my glands have tumors on them, so they have to remove 3.5 of the glands, and the remaining half may atrophy and die, and I would be left without any parathyroid glands. This did not sit well with me at all. So I wouldn't have minded 1 or 2, but they said if you lose all 4, you're going to end up having to take calcium supplements every 2 hours for the rest of your life. So I thought, well, there's got to be a better way, and thus began my search for alternatives. And as I said, my practice as a psychologist was pretty much non-Western medicine, so I had always been keen on nutrition and supplements and frequency healing, other things that can help people be healthy besides, medications, prescriptions, and surgeries. So I began pursuing a path of, healthy living and alternative interventions. And that's how I came in contact with QHS. And this, I think, was in 2021. And there was a deadline that you had to sign up, I think, by May 1st. And I found out about QHS like on April 24th. I'm like, whoa, this is a God thing. I've got 1 week to sign up for this. So I signed up, became a member, and I've been carrying my V6 device every day. I had 2 of them for a while, but I lost 1 of them, so I've been using that every day. And I'm excited about the future and the QArc. Unfortunately, my hyperparathyroidism still exists, and along with that, I have osteoporosis, atherosclerosis. I wake up 3-4 times a night to use the bathroom. So despite all the interventions that I've done, my calcium levels, the issue with hyperparathyroidism is that the calcium goes into your blood rather than into your bones. So this causes the osteoporosis and also has a negative impact on your kidneys. And that's why I need to do something. So I'm scheduled for surgery the end of August, but I'm still praying that God heals me, and I'm still praying that QArc comes out before the end of August, and that I will be healed and not have to go through with the surgery. But, again, I've done everything I can to avoid it, but the calcium levels have not gone down, so I need to do something so that, my bones and my kidneys don't deteriorate. But the good news is that I'm healthier than I've ever been. I feel great. I feel fantastic. I don't have the fatigue anymore. I exercise regularly. I can do 25 pull-ups, 100 push-ups, run a mile in 9 minutes. So I'm doing pretty good and enjoying life as best as I can as a 73-year-old. And I'm just looking forward to more great times ahead, believing that my condition will be resolved one way or another, trusting God and praying for Dr. A and Cynthia and the QArc. And I have the deepest gratitude for all the admin and Wade and everyone who works so lovingly and so tenaciously to heal the world. And that's my goal, is that I can be part of that process to bring healing to the rest of the world. So I look forward to meeting many of you and enjoying all the blessings that the healing from God we will all receive. Thanks much and have a great day.
Join us on the Prequel, where every story matters and every voice is heard. Because here at QHS, we're all about healing, learning, and growing together.